Quick, a recipe just told you to cook something over medium heat. Your stove knob is marked with numbers from 1 to 9, so that means you should pick number 4 or 5, right? Not necessarily. A gas stove's 5 is stronger than an electric 5. This tiny burner's 5 is weaker than the big one's 5, and then to cap it all off, each burner has its own idiosyncrasies, like this one, where the difference between medium-low and medium-high is just a tiny turn of the knob. Instead of prescribing numbers, let me demystify what recipe writers usually mean when they tell you to cook something over a certain heat level. First, warm. A pan set to warm should just barely hold its contents above body temp. You can melt butter slowly and it won't foam. You can hold warm water in a pot without generating any bubbles. This setting is for when you need to keep food warm without changing its appearance. Think hollandaise sauce that needs to remain fluid and pourable without cooking down. On warm, you can touch the pan for a second without hurting yourself. Next up, low. A pot of water set to low will eventually generate tiny, infrequent bubbles. At this temp, butter will melt and potentially foam, but it won't brown. You won't be able to touch the pan with your full hand, but maybe you could handle a single finger for a second without screaming. Frying an egg on low heat will cook it through like a white and yellow egg emoji, but it won't yield dark brown crispy edges. You use low heat for simmering stock all day or for cooking oatmeal without scorching the bottom. The tiny bubbles that only rise every now and then are great for poaching something really delicate, like a piece of fish. How about medium-low? Bubbling liquids in a medium-low pot are still gentle but continuously forming and popping. At medium-low heat, oil will not smoke, but it will loosen up and flow freely like water. Food will cook and veggies will soften, but they won't really take on color. Medium-low is good for over-easy eggs. The white edges will flutter and bubble instead of being totally still like for the emoji egg. It's the heat level that I use when I'm cooking something that takes a long time to cook and I want to speed it up without ruining it. Think caramelized onions, which take forever because you can't go too hot or they'll take on color. Or something like a weeknight tomato sauce where I want to go as fast as I can without risking big, aggressive bubbles that splatter the food everywhere. I'm gonna move on to medium now, but first, an aside regarding heat adjustments. Just because you set the knob to a certain heat level 2 minutes ago doesn't mean the pan is reflecting that heat level yet. All pots and pans need different amounts of time to change temps. Have you ever cooked on electric coils? Those things take forever to boil a pot of water. And then when it is boiling, if you dial the knob to low and then immediately add a cup of rice to it, it stays way too hot for a long time. Always keep in mind, your temperature adjustments are not instant. So medium is where cooking gets active, but not very aggressive. I would call medium the toasting zone. A slice of bread should toast without drying out. It should take like 2 minutes per side. Butter makes big foamy bubbles and starts to turn brown as those milk solids inside of it get toasted. Vegetables cook at like a speed walker's pace, quickly, but with no real risk of scorching. A pan full of oil starts to make these barely perceptible shimmering waves. This is the zone for dry toasting nuts, quickly, for shallow frying chunks of garlic without instantly burning them up. Go cook a 6-inch pancake at a temp that browns nicely without burning, and that's the medium heat for that specific burner. Medium is probably the most important one to dial in because it's really the highest you want to go when you're cooking something dry in a non-stick pan. The high end of medium heat is going to start generating that ominous Teflon smoke and damage an empty non-stick pan. That's when it's time to stick to carbon steel or stainless steel or cast iron. If medium heat is the toasting zone, then medium high is the searing zone. It's when things start to get smoky and scary, especially for apartment dwellers. Butter foams aggressively and turns brown almost instantly. Adding wet ingredients like meat or mushrooms should immediately sizzle loudly enough to drown out polite conversation. Ingredients like chilies and garlic will burn if left in one place for more than a couple of seconds. This is where you can't be adding powdered spices unless they're being applied to a wet surface. If your powder hits the dry pan, it'll turn black and acrid almost instantly. Extra virgin olive oil will start to smoke. That's why I'm way more likely to switch to a neutral oil like peanut or canola. Medium high is what I would use for fatty and forgiving meats like chicken thighs or ground sausage. They can take the heat and don't demand precision cooking. It's what I would use for pan roasting chunks of vegetables for a dark, charred exterior with a tender, crisp interior. Shrimp is another good use case. Okay, turn off your smoke detectors because it's time to talk high heat. High heat can be scary and dangerous. Any pan will begin to smoke even if there's no oil in it. And if that pan is cast iron, even the handle will be too hot to touch without protection. Adding oil to a dry, hot pan will smoke instantly. Adding ingredients to that oil will splatter, not just on the countertops nearby, but on your clothes, your arms, and maybe even the upper cabinets. Butter will burn immediately. Nuts, spices, and garlic will burn immediately. I use high heat for these chunks of chicken breast that were cooked sous vide, since all I want to do is add color, not cook them any further. After that, I turn the heat off and then add the sauce to it, otherwise the sauce would burn. This is the temp for cooking peppers and onions when you want charred black edges. I'll use a high heat dry pan for toasting flatbread like tortillas in a matter of seconds. I think it's good to try cooking on high heat so you learn what happens to common ingredients. That way you know better than to follow a recipe like this one that has you adding wet green beans and sliced garlic to a hot pan of extra virgin olive oil. There is one last kind of heat, and it's usually given a more aggressive name in recipes. Anything along the lines of screaming hot or ripping high heat. At extreme temps, oil can ignite and start a fire in your pan. Cook time is going to be measured in seconds, not minutes. If you ever find yourself thinking, why would I ever cook at temps that high? Keep it that way. It ain't for you yet. This is anything at or above the 600+ degree ultra hot heat that's only used sparingly and always with specific intent. Something like wok cooking, where the food is constantly being stirred and only in the wok for a few seconds. Something like charring a super thin flap steak while leaving the interior a little bit pink. Neapolitan pizza relies on extreme surface temperatures. Okay, those are all the heat levels that you will probably ever get from a recipe or a video, and there's already one type of comment that I anticipate along the lines of, this is all too complicated. Why don't recipes just call for exact temperatures? To which I say, that won't really solve the problem the way that you think it will. The heat inside of a pan will go up when you put a lid on it, and then down when you take the lid off. The visual cues I provided are based on room temp kitchens at sea level, and those signs can change with elevation. I even bought one of these laser guns to measure my own temps so that I could put them in this video, but look at how wide of a range some of those zones are. And even then, that's me measuring the temp of the pan's surface before anything goes into it. Once you add water, it can only get to 212, since that's the boiling point of water, so the laser suddenly isn't much help at all. If a recipe needs the cooking medium to be a specific temperature, it will call for that number, like when you're frying or baking. Otherwise, forget the numbers. The goal doesn't need to be that we all aim for the same exact temperatures. I think the goal should be to learn over time what to look for, listen for, and smell for while you cook. The quickest way to gain familiarity with your stove and confidence in your ability to time the adjustments is to cook as often as you can. And to like and subscribe, and to send all my videos to everyone you know. Please, I am so ready for my flop era to be over. I learned my lesson. I will post more, okay? Thank you. Trade has paid to be mentioned at the end of this video. They have done so on almost every video that I've posted this year, and that's because I like Trade and I continue to personally subscribe. When I make a pot of hot coffee for multiple people, I use a rotating selection of whole bean medium roast. When I use the espresso machine for cortados, I use the Monkey Bite. And most recently, I finally bought some pre-ground coffee from Trade for the first time because they grind it specifically for cold brew with a texture that is far more coarse than my grinder can go. I like the way that it's easier to filter. Anyway, whether you drink specialty espresso drinks, cold brew, or filter drip black, Trade is going to get you freshly roasted, freshly ground, or whole bean coffee at a fair price. They take the offerings from over 50 roasters across the US and then send you the good stuff that you're guaranteed to like according to a taste-based quiz that you can take before signing up. If you don't like what you get, Trade will replace it for free until you do. Right now, Trade is offering 50% off a 1-month trial at drinktrade.com/Shaquille. That's drinktrade.com/Shaquille to get 50% off 1 month. drinktrade.com/Shaquille. Thank you.